Hey, what's going on? This is Brother Paris. It's Saturday, August 17th, 2019, man. Man, I've been sitting on this message, this video that I'm about to bring to y'all, man. I've been sitting on this for quite some time, couple of years actually, but I think God's been waiting for me to do this video um, to a time where I had clarity and I can look back and see everything's clearly, and give a breakdown that's really good. I hope is impactful. For some, it's going to be very hard to hear because you have been deceived into believing a certain way of thinking by this world system. But I hope that you can listen long enough and open up your heart and be open-minded and be like Jesus said, into the kingdom of heaven, you have to be like a child. So I hope you're willing to hear God and forget all the man-made ideas and ideals that you've been fed and miseducated with, and be willing to renew your mind away from this world into the truth of God. What I'm going to be talking about is why I'm no longer a social justice warrior. And it's a tough situation and it's a tough topic because there's so many people who think that they're doing God's will, fighting for social justice, when they're exactly doing the opposite of God's will. And me myself, I've lost a lot of friends once God revealed this truth to me, that wanted to continue to be part of the social justice movement. But you can tell a tree by its fruit, and the fruit of the social justice movement has just been more division, more anger, more strife, more pride, more going away from the things of God. Even those people who I was friends with, who believe in this, when I've tried to speak the truth of them, they just became so angry and uh, bitter and attacking. So that just shows you the fruit of this so-called gospel, which the Bible, Jesus was clear that don't accept any gospel other than the gospel I gave, and the social gospel is not the gospel that Jesus Christ gave. So I want to kind of talk about my experience, how I got involved with social justice work and how I got out, why I got out, things I saw. Going to be candid. We're going to name some names. Again, some people's going to be pissed off and hurt. But again, I'm not doing this to hurt anyone. No, I do this because I like to set people free. I got involved with an agency. It was called City Mission Society. I was probably about 25, 26 years old. I was going to church. I just came back from playing professional basketball. Decided I want to, follow God and try to give back to the community. I was involved with this church, and I was up there. I can't remember why I was up there, but this group, City Mission Society, which was a nonprofit, was having a meeting there, and the minister had introduced me to the people that were running it, and I started working with them, and they kind of brought me into the organization. I was a summer intern because I was in Bible school at that time, so I was part of a theologian summer program because they were a faith-based nonprofit, and part of my job was to be actually was to work, in a program with at-risk youth. Learn more about things like violence, gangs, things like that was going on in the greater Boston area. Try to develop programming in and around, becoming the answer to those programs. They're working with a program from the that H block area where the church my grandmother had attended was at the time, and you know, at first, I mean, I felt good. I was going to a lot of different meetings. I was getting kind of known as a young person involved with trying to stop the violence and advocating for young, especially minority youth and all those things. And I was really into it, man. I remember at one point, I ended up being part of the Occupy movement. We had it's Occupy Boston, and then we had a subject to Occupy the Hood. I just started working with so many different people in the community. A lot of progressive, you call them progressive liberal people. Even worked with the woman that's part of that squad of the congresswomen that are going against Trump, Ayanna Presley. I worked with a lot of religious leaders, politicians within the black community, and it was all under the social justice gospel. And what it was is basically like, it was about white racism, white supremacy affecting poor black people, poor people of color. It was about the police as a subsection of white supremacy attacking poor black people. It was about the neighborhood, the lack of education, lack of all. It was all about, and it was really just for like poor minorities. Like they were, they made it seem like they're the only ones who are affected by some of these systematic things. And while we know that they at times it it may seem that there's more minorities affected, the numbers say different. There's a lot of these issues: poverty, drugs, crime, lack of good education, lack of jobs. These are things that occur not only within a black inner city community, but even in rural areas where it's all white people, Native Americans. It is an issue that is kind of a consequence of sin in a capitalist society. Um, and they came up with this, basically, so I started to work with these kids that were in my neighborhood. They were part of a gang. All right. And, basically, I met some of them through basketball. And then they would bring their friends, and then they started coming to the program. And, I had these kids in my house. I mean, I was giving them money, I was feeding them, I was taking care of them, driving them places, helping them get jobs. I was doing all this thing, and I was doing all that of my own pocket. I spent thousands of dollars on these young people, trying to help them, try to kind of help them have an opportunity, because what I was taught, what I was led to believe, is that these kids have been cheated out of any real opportunity. So it's our job to give them opportunity so that they succeed. Because if we don't give them opportunity, then they're not able to succeed on their own based on the system that's in place, which is really not true at all. So what I started to see when my eyes first started to get open was working with the politicians and the ministers. And I was working with this guy named Minister Hobbs, and he was a pastor who apparently was cured of HIV and AIDS, and he had a ministry devoted against HIV and AIDS, as well as working with people from the LGBTQ community. And I guess he himself was formerly, homosexual male drug abuser. And he was bringing me around to all these different places, and meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. And he didn't have a car, and I had a car, so he wanted me to drive him everywhere and do this, that, and the third. And it became just really, really overbearing, and I started to become tired and worn out, and my finances was draining. And I just didn't we just kept on going to the same meeting, and it was about the same things, but there was really no action. Like nothing ever was done. It was just people talking, and I started like, man, people just want to hear themselves talk. I started to realize like these meetings were meaningless. You know what I mean? And there was no action, but it's like it was almost designed for people to kind of like puff themselves up. You know what I mean? And as I started to have my eyes open, the people I was working with, like Minister Hobbs, he was also working. He had a radio station called Boston Praise Radio, which was out of Global Ministries Church, which is Pastor Bruce Wall's church, who was someone who I used to go to his church, part of his after school program, who was a guy that was supposed to be for the youth in the community and stopping violence. And after spending a lot of time with him, you realized that a lot of it was politics. He had an issue with the Boston police, and he kind of used his platform under the auspices of a church to really fight these political battles. There wasn't a lot of Jesus. There wasn't a lot of Bible teaching. It was really a lot of you know kind of political stuff, hidden behind the name of Jesus. And as I started to see all these things, and I would say certain things, and kind of, realize certain things, these folks started to kind of turn on me. They didn't want to be associated with me. They wouldn't want me to be on the radio station anymore, even though, I had, spent my money and time and all these different things working with these individuals. But then I started to realize that it wasn't really about really making a change. It was about kind of promoting this social justice gospel, which was kind of really based on a victimhood and a welfare society, based on where people were always victims. They were always victims of a system, and it was always the white people that were the enemy, and it was always my poor black minorities who were the victims. And even though that many times it was the people within the black community who were destroying each other, by drug use, by selling drugs, by gang violence, by shootings, by killings, by no emphasis, not putting emphasis on education, and certain cultural negative mindsets. Uh, Even that was attributed to white. We had no self responsibility, which I started to see meant that we had no real control. I started seeing these preacher politicians. It's like they keep on asking the same system that they say is oppressing and unjust to pull them out of the injustice, which to me didn't make sense. Why would you ask the person that put you in the trap to take you out the trap? So I started to realize, and these people were very intelligent. They're not stupid. So, I started to realize like there was something deeper. It was a deeper game that was going on. And in fact that the things that they were promoting in the way they did it, in fact, not only made things better, but things progressively have gotten worse. Like things have not gotten better. Things have just kind of like spiraled down and continue to spiral out of control within these communities, these liberal communities. And especially today, and then the whole I used to work for an organization called the YWCA, and I used to help facilitate a youth police dialogue program. And that this is years before this whole police thing became popular. And at first everything was good, and we was having fair discussions where obviously police at times are wrong. Not saying that all police are good, but there was a lot of obviously stereotypes of police and stereotypes police had about people in the community. Stereotypes going both ways that we would sit down and talk about, and we'd really be able to get some real dialogue and get people on both sides to really be able to see the truth and come together. And I've always thought it was interesting that the black community, which has the most crime, has adopted a mindset that the police are the problem. And I believe that it's a systematic and satanic conspiracy to have a division and a separation between the police who are supposed to protect and stop crime and communities that have the most crime that need protected and need crime to get stopped. You see, it's a spirit of lawlessness that they're trying to create by trying to create the police as the bad guy, and that even those in the community who are criminals who do wrong, they are heroes or victims of a greater system. So even though they've done wrong, it's not their fault. Their wrong is covered up and excused because of this systematic stuff, which is completely unjust and really goes against God's way. So basically, as I continued to work with the YWCA, I was working with a guy named Fran Arias, great guy, good friend of mine, and then he ended up leaving, and they started bringing in. They brought in a gay woman, a gay girl, and it's like the YWCA again. There's social justice. The other thing that a lot of these social justice places that's supposed to be Christian promoting is this LGBTQ and homosexual stuff, which is an abomination to God. So when you can't have a social justice gospel promoting things that's not of God, it just doesn't even make sense. But so they brought her in, and the tone of the police dialogue, we got into the Michael Brown, the stuff that started with Obama, all this, the idea that the police are the bad guy, and things that got real tenuous. And you start to see that the kids were being brainwashed through places like the YWC, through the media, that the police was all wrong. And it's like, it doesn't make sense. I mean, the police are there to stop criminals, but in many places, especially like Baltimore, after that Freddie Gray situation, the police don't want to do their job anymore because they feel like by doing their job, they're opening up to these social justice warriors who are going to attack them and attack their character. So then they just say, screw it, we're not gonna stop criminals. And crime in Baltimore has just skyrocketed. And essentially, that's what they want. It's a spirit of lawlessness that's behind the social justice gospel, because there's no accountability in the social justice gospel. It's always pointing out instead of here. It's always pointing the finger at someone else, and there's no accountability for the record number of black on black killings, of the record number of black gangs, record number of drugs being sold and used in the community, the promotion of all these negative things through the music that we celebrate. You know what I mean? It's all these things that we do to ourselves. You know what I mean? But nobody wants to take accountability for it because under the social justice gospel. Um, so in my experience is kind of politically, and within the religious, organizations really started to open my eyes. I was part of Morning Star Baptist Church during the time where they had something called the Mattapan Massacre, when 4 people were killed in a drug deal, drug bust gone wrong, drug deal gone wrong, including a little 1, 2 year old baby. And then the church wanted to go out and want to start trying to march in the streets, talk about stop the violence. When the church itself does nothing to be proactive about the issue, but because it was in their neighborhood and the cameras were on, here's and I started to see all this hypocrisy that was going on around these real social issues. And I'm like, you're really out there fighting for social justice. We need people in these streets, in these neighborhoods, before something happens, preaching in the name of gospel, holding people accountable. Get the drug dealers out, get the gangbangers out, get the murderers out, holding people accountable if we really cared about the community. But this church, these folks, they only cared about what would give them a photo op, would bring them on TV. Man, I remember one time they had going back to early '90s. A lot of they have this thing called faith-based initiatives where the government gives money to cities, inner cities, and that goes to the so-called religious leaders, especially in the black communities, to create anti-violence programs. So it was, in this thing, you can research the Boston Miracle and the farce that was with Jeffrey Brown and Eugene Rivers and all these guys who, they took credit for something that they really didn't have they really didn't have a lot to do. It was just kind of secular that things kind of improved because the crack cocaine epidemic, because of the nature of crack and the nature of what was going on in the streets, people were either dying and going to jail. So that's why crime really went down. But these guys felt like they did a lot. They took credit for it, and so they were giving out some more money, and they had all these mentions come together for all these big photo ops because this grant had just been given to the city. Blah 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 blah. So I went. I was invited to go. And they even wanted me to go up on stage with them, but at that point I had became real cynical in my spirit about what was going on because I had heard stories about ministers sending people with guns and try to threaten other ministers and fight over grant money like they was in gangs and streets, and it was all these ministers. There was no more murder, had all these little street ministries, and it was just everybody was beefing with each other. I mean, it was so much not of God. I was really confused, and it really got me to the point of almost depression. And I was just really mentally and spiritually confused at what was going on because I thought we was really out here trying to give the gospel and using the gospel of Jesus' life, Jesus Christ, to transform lives in the community. But that's really what it wasn't about. And this one meeting, this gentleman who named Jamal Crawford, who one of the biggest race baiters in Boston. I was working with him at the time because I didn't really understand what was going on. He was really into the white man kill the white man, mobilizing black, blah 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 blah. And I was naive. I really didn't know what was going on, and I was trying to be part of something that I thought was a movement to make change. So anyway, he introduced me to Eugene Rivers, all right, who probably the most famous black minister in Boston. And he's like, and he's, Jamal was like, man, this is brother Cherry, young minister working with these kids in the street. Oh my God, excuse me. And he wanted to know, he wanted to talk to you about, he know that you've been doing the street stuff for years and wanted to talk to you more about it. And I sat down with him for a couple of minutes. And Eugene Rivers, the guy, Minister Rivers, turned to me and said, young man, he was like, if you want to be impactful in these streets, I'm gonna show you how to get money. All right, this game is all about getting money. All right, I'll set you up with a meeting. We'll sit there, we'll have lunch, and I'll show you the blueprint to get this money. And he got up and walked away, and I was just left there stunned. Like it was one of those moments like when you find out that Santa Claus don't exist. Like this dude was like the leader, like the most famous youth minister to working with youth, working with kids in gangs. And this dude just told me it ain't about the gospel. Like he didn't say nothing about Jesus, nothing about the gospel. He said it's about getting this money, and it just left me shell shocked. And after that, I really started to try to distance myself from a lot of these individuals. I was working with the dude Jamal Crawford again on the Occupy the Hood movement, and we was connected with Occupy Boston, and they were getting thousands upon thousands of dollars being sent in from all over the country to support the Occupy movement. And I think they offered the Occupy Hood movement like $10,000, but they just wanted us to kind of come up with a business plan or plan what we're going to do with those funds. And dude Jamal Crawford is going to turn on them and say the only reason they're asking for a business plan is because he's black. Now you go to any bank in the world. You go anywhere and you're trying to get a business loan. You gotta have a business plan. You gotta have something in writing, whether you're black, yellow, green, or whatever. But this dude ended up costing. We ended up not getting the money. That $10,000 actually could have been used for the community. We ended up not getting it because this dude Jamal Crawford went to the newspapers and told them about Occupy Boston was racist, and it became all these big headlines. And he was in there on the newspaper getting photo ops and all that. But ultimately, the community suffered because we never got that $10,000. And I started looking and see like this is counterproductive. But yet, these folks got to keep the people enslaved to this mindset, this victimhood oppression mindset, not for the people's benefit, but for their own. And then also was my experiences working with the young people in the community that also opened my eyes. I was working with a lot of these kids in the gang, and they would go to the church and Bible study, go to events, and I helped them get jobs and do all these things. But I've noticed like there was really no change in behavior. One kid who had beat a gun charge, and I was trying to mentor and help him get a job, got caught with a gun again. You know what I mean? And you go to court and you try to help them. And I remember one time when the street workers came and we was trying to pray with the kid. The kid didn't even want to pray after he got out of court, after he beat the charge of having a gun that he knew he had, but he threw it and they couldn't identify put the match to prints. And instead of thanking God for actually for getting off, yeah, he had a nasty attitude like he was too good to even pray. You know what I mean? And then I started seeing little things where, one time I was on the bus and these kids had just been at my house a couple of days before and acting like they had changed, or we're not going to be out here in these streets no more and we're going to da da da. And I'm on the bus and the bus stops and I see this one kid running, like he's running from somebody. He runs, gets on the bus, all right? And then a couple of stops later, who runs on the bus? The kids I mentor. They had been chasing this one kid down, and now they're on the bus. The kids got knives and guns, and they're about to have a big beef. And I'm standing between the group of kids of 6 or 7 kids I mentor, and there's one kid from the rival gang that had chased down. But yet they're trying to tell me that they're making changes, and I'm spending money and spending my time to try to help them do the right thing, and they don't want to do the right thing. And then I guess they were saying how the police at the train station were harassing them, and I would go and get into arguments with the police and get into this stuff with the undercover cops because based on these kids saying they're being harassed, but the kids were the ones who were doing wrong. They're still out there robbing and stealing and doing this gang activity and trying to act like they're the victims. You see what I'm saying? And while they were trying to act like they was doing the right thing in front of me so they can get the resources and the things that they wanted out of the relationship with me, they were still living in the street. All right. And I saw this not just in my own personal experience with these group of kids, but we're talking to other street workers, other groups of kids, seeing different other programs throughout the city, working with these demographic of kids where they even when they're in, there was an incident where these 2 kids were part of a work program. They was part of a work program, but they was from rival gangs and they were both working. And the one kid from the rival gang called his boy and said, so-and-so's down here working with me. And they came up and killed the kid on the job site. Do you see what I'm saying? So you can give them jobs, give them money, give them a check, provide them out. And these kids are out working in the good part of town. They were way out the way to go find this kid and kill, to take him out the environment. But you know what? See, the issue is not poverty. The issue is not bad education. The issue is not white supremacy. The issue is a heart filled with anger and bitterness, a heart that is evil, all right? A heart that's filled with murderous thoughts, a heart that is all about yourself, about getting money by any means possible, all right? A heart that is not content with what God's given you, all right? Because even those who live in poverty in America are rich compared to those in third world countries. All right. And in some of these third world countries, they're not killing each other to the point where people are killing each other here. All right. Or at least not for the reasons. See what I'm saying? There's people out here dying after street corners. All right. Named after the slave owners, the same people that y'all feel like y'all screaming, yelling, and jumping down against, but y'all dying after the street corners named after them. You're still in mental slavery, but you get mad when Kanye goes and says that you're still slaves. You are still slaves, all right? And the social justice gospel, which is no gospel law, continues to enslave you, all right? And these kids that I try to, we see these kids time and time again get all the help and opportunities and still do wrong because it's not the external, it's the internal. And only Jesus Christ can change an evil, angry, vengeful, wrathful, nasty heart. And that's what these young people have through the music, through the culture, through the feeling of victimhood that this social gospel is, due to how the lack of accountability that the social justice gospel promotes. All right, this has developed people who are angry and bitter and wrathful and not accountable to themselves, not accountable to God. The social justice gospel even feeds into this idea of the Bible and Christianity of the white man. And the white man used it to justify and all this foolishness. See, when you go against God, you go down a slippery slope that the devil will take you further and further away into truth. But those who promote the social gospel, social justice gospel is so blind they can't see the slippery slope, and they don't see that they're actually leading people down that slippery slope away from Christ. All right, but especially if they're black or they had experiences with racism in the past, or they feel they don't want to take self, they may, there's one woman, she's the DA in Boston, she want to get rid of all these crimes. It's like, how you gonna make these crimes legal? But what it is that she had brothers, Rachel Rollins, and she had brothers who committed crimes who are part of the criminal justice system. But so she can't be accountable and look at her life clearly and say, you know what, my brothers did wrong. They're not good people. They're criminals. Instead of accepting that truth, she has to then make the whole society be wrong. And her brothers are now victims of this unjust society, so that now everybody else is victims of this unjust society. And it's social justice is really social injustice gospel. And we're going to get into the Bible real quick before I close out, man. I'm going to give y'all some Bible verses so we can really understand what's going on. And as believers, as we are true believers of God, that we go away and we shun the social justice gospel. John MacArthur, a famous minister, he last year made a statement on social justice, and he basically said that, that the social justice movement endangers Christians with an onslaught of dangerous and false teachings that threaten the gospel, misrepresent scripture, and lead people away from the grace of Jesus Christ. And it basically, it's so true. This idea, with all these protests, that came out of the Michael Brown, other incidents. I mean, it's just woe to those who call good evil, woe to those that call evil good. And let's break this down real quick. Exodus 23:6 says, do not deny justice in court because a person is poor. All right, it's talking about justice in court. It doesn't say justice just if a person is black or any particular race, or because they're gay, or any, which is a sin and abomination. It says, do not deny justice to court to any person just because of their financial status. And we know that poor people come in all colors, races, and creeds. All right. These are God's definitions when he talks about justice. All right. Job 36:6, God gives justice to the oppressed. All right. And then the oppressed in Hebrew is translated as the persecuted, the downtrodden, the oppressed, enslaved. All right. And again, this is talking about oppressed people of every race. All right. Does this world system discriminate against who wants to impress? Of course not. You got the 99%, which is everybody, and the 1%, which is the power of spiritual wickedness in high places. All right. And it's a spiritual oppression. All right. So all of us that's part of this world system are oppressed. All right. Whether it's financially, economically, spiritually, we're all under some level of oppression and attack. All right. Blacks, yes, we're enslaved, yes. But if you look at history, not only of this country, but history of this world, that countries and nations were conquered and destroyed and taken over, and people were enslaved of all nations of all times. All right. The idea of people being enslaved and oppressed is nothing that is specific toward the black experience in America. All right. It's still wrong. We're not taking anything away from that. And God will have judgment against those who oppress people. But black people do not historically, over the time of world history, lay claim to the only people that was oppressed. And and today, a lot of our oppression is self oppression, not oppression from the outside. Because things have changed where if you do want to be successful, it doesn't, if you're black, doesn't matter where you are, whatever color you are, doesn't matter where you come from or the color of skin. If you want to be successful in this world system, you can gain a certain level of success if you choose to. If you choose to be a failure, you shall be a failure, and it's not anyone else's fault other than yourself. Proverbs 28:5. The evil do not understand justice, but those who seek the Lord understand everything. Again, those who are evil, if you those and it's gonna hurt a lot of these folks that think they're doing God's will. He's talking about you because you're evil within the way you look at things. You don't look at things from God's view of justice. And because of that, and because you've not renewed your mind from the ways of this world, the ideas of racism, sexism, and homophobiaism, and all these different type of things are feminine. These are feminines. They are all ideas of the world. They're not ideas of God. There's no Jew, nor Greek, nor male, nor female in Christ. These are His words, not mine. All right. The world says it's an injustice for a young man with a gun, with a 10-page rap sheet of a dangerous, violent criminal with a gun to be shot down by the police. This world says that's an injustice. But God says it is injustice because He sowed what He has reaped. He has sown death and destruction within His community, within His life, and ultimately you reap what you sow. That's God's justice. Again, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Isaiah 42:1 says that Jesus will bring justice to the nations. All right, it doesn't say that God's servants, but Yeshua Himself. He will rule over. He will judge over. He'll rule over a perfect earth and heaven. He'll righteously judge everyone for their deeds, good or bad. All right, a final justice, a final judgment. All right, we shouldn't be fighting for social justice, but patiently trusting God for social judgment. We place God's scales of justice with the imperfect scales of human judgment, and we need to no longer do that. We need to simply fight for right versus wrong, expose evil with no agenda attached. All right, Jeremiah 9:24. If we're gonna be proud or brag on anything, we need to be talking about trusting that knowing that we serve a God who sees all, that will continue His judgment, because God judges people today, now in their lives, individually for all they do, and then there will be a final judgment where He will judge all for right versus wrong. And again, this is His judgment. All right, we don't have the ability to judge. So there's no way that we can be promotion of a social justice gospel when only God's the one that has true judgment, and there's no way that socially that society can bring justice. Society is in the righteousness of society is but filthy rags. So therefore, those whose righteousness are filthy rags have no place to judge. All right, in order to bring justice. All right, Amos 5:24, famous passage used by Martin Luther King, talking about justice flowing like water. If you understand the context of what was going on in Amos chapter 5, God is calling out the religious leaders. All right, talk about their religious practices, the things that they were focused on, social justice, i.e., and we're saying that they were nothing to Him, that He only wanted true and pure justice, not based on race, identity, or sex or sexual preference, but simply on what God says is right and what God says is wrong. All right, Matthew 24:18 is basically calling Isaiah 42:1, which reiterates Jesus Himself who brings justice to all nations, and He will judge everyone justly. Again, not according to identity or race or background, but according to their actions, good or bad only. All right. Luke 11:42, Jesus calling out the Pharisees for being so pious and having so many religious practices and fighting for social justice and things like that, while ignoring true justice and the love of God, which is His commandments And these social justice warriors, while they think they're doing God's work, they are bypassing God, the love of God, by bypassing his commandments and making his grace nullified, by refusing to make people take accountability for their sins, by pointing the finger but not pointing the finger back, by pointing out the log in their brothers, the speck in their brother's eyes, not seeing their log. That's what the social justice gospel has done, and it's further destroyed the community, and especially in the black community, and really has put a black mark on the name of Christ. We are not to be concerned of the things of society. All right, we are being counterculture. All right, so if you sound like CNN and you call yourself a Christian, you're wrong. The same way if you sound like Fox News and you call yourself a Christian, you are wrong. We're supposed to not sound and act and believe as if the world does and think as if the world does. And the social justice gospel is simply a gospel of this world, of society's justice. Not God's justice, but it's a gospel that elevates society as the final ruler of judgment, of the final bringer of justice. And it puts man in God's place and usurps God's place, and it's based on our pride. Because I felt a lot of pride. I felt like I was important. I felt like I was somebody, because I was fighting against these systems, and it was just self-righteousness. And you know what? The Bible doesn't say things are going to get better. The Bible said things are going to get worse. So all you fight for all these, we're going to change, we're going to stop racism. It's never, ever going to happen. Racism, when it does happen, when it really in its truest form, is simply just a byproduct of sin. All right, it's a consequence of sin. All right, we don't have a skin problem, we have a sin problem. It's in the sin of the heart. All right, and if you preach anything other than that, I'm here to rebuke you, and I will always continue to call you out. I will not be in relationship with those who promote a gospel that is not of Christ. And I will pray that you repent. But if you do not repent of a social justice gospel, I pray that God will strike and punish you, just like he does those who promote any other gospel that goes against him. So you're warned. All right. Again, I hope that you've opened your heart and you're able to hear the truth. All right. Don't kill the messenger. If you feel a certain way about it, you need to get on your knees and pray to God and repent and ask him to forgive you for promoting a social justice gospel, for calling right wrong and wrong right, and get back into a true relationship with God, and promote the true, pure, unadulterated gospel, and hold people accountable to God's ways and his commands, and his true justice. All right. So that's why I'm no longer a social justice warrior. And I hope some of the stuff that I said will help you be able to see God's truth. All right. Peace.